One of the questions you got a lot last year was, are you going to do any layoffs? Things are tough. Are you going to do layoffs? And I think, we had this philosophy that even though we were in a pandemic, expectations and sort of our contract with citizens hadn't changed. Would you comment on that a little bit?
Be glad to. It's a great question. It's a great point. So to kind of start that one at the beginning, the furloughs, the layoffs, there were a few voluntary furloughs that occurred, but I highlight those were voluntary furloughs from the city. Even though we had shifted into that pandemic and there were things, libraries were closed for a period of time, community centers, things like that, our model was to offer to those employees, we still have work for you to do. It's kind of like what I talked about earlier. It may not be what you were doing yesterday, may not be what you trained for, but if you're willing to help us, we'll get you taught up on whatever that happens to be, and we'd love to have you. And the response to that, the acceptance to that was just tremendous. And we still today have people working in some areas that's probably not where they started. Now, as we begin to reopen and things go back to normal, you'll see that shift. But really, I think our public benefited from that flexibility and that willingness of those employees to do that. Nobody was paid to sit. They were paid to work, and they did.
So what are they looking at when they're digging in? I mean, what are the things, when they're looking at the financial fitness strength, so to speak, of the city's coffers, what do they look for?
They look at a lot of different things. So I'm going to talk on the city side. What they're going to look at is our economy as a whole. They're going to look at everything and all the different agencies around us. So they do look at our entire economy. But specifically to the city, they're going to look at our financial health and our well-being. So they're going to be looking at a lot of income statement and balance sheet type metrics. So they're going to be looking at our cash and investments on hand, how much liquidity and reserves we have. They're going to be looking at our total debt load as opposed to how much revenues we bring in year over year to make sure that we can cover our debt service.
I remember sitting in one of those meetings, and one of my takeaways was how fixated they were, the credit agents, the credit agencies were on Texas Tech, and they wanted to make sure Texas Tech was going to come back to school. I mean, talk a little bit about that. I think the interconnected, you mentioned that, but I'm going to go a little deeper. The interconnected nature of our community is something that few people really realize, and it bears itself out when we think about credit ratings.
Right, it does. When we have a population just over 260,000 people, but you talk about 40,000 of those are college students, 40,000 plus. That's a big part of your economy. So when you do have tech students here, they're out in the community, they're out in your stores, they're buying groceries, they're renting from your apartments, their houses, they're buying. So they're a big consumer within. So that does play into the whole community. So yes, the credit rating agencies are very, very interested in Texas Tech.
So Jessica, our long-term plan Lubbock 2040 is now a bit more than 2 years old. You guys, working with the council, we're down the road on some of those big, those top 5 priorities that was called out to us by the citizens group. One of those was impact fees. We finished our work around impact fees last year. I don't really want to rehash that, and we've all got the memories of that. But how do those go into effect this year? And sort of big picture, what do those mean to our community?
Big picture, absolutely. So impact fees are a way that development that is coming online in the city of Lubbock in the future will pay a portion of the cost that will expand the infrastructure to support those developments, such as roadways, water, and wastewater. Those will become effective in June of this year in 2021, but they will become effective for property that is now platted after that date or property that was previously platted and triggered by a building permit within a certain time frame. It's a way that we will gain some more revenue to help with those big projects that are going to be necessary in the future.
Another thing that was called out as a priority was the rewrite of our zoning codes. We called it Unified Development Code, UDC. So that's in process right now. Updates everybody on where we are with that.
Absolutely. So on our Unified Development Code, we are coming towards the end of the project. We are extending it out a few months so that we can ensure we really get a lot of ample opportunity for the public to look at the document, provide their comments and their feedback as well before we adopt. So far, we have released 2 modules, so about 50% of the draft Unified Development Code to the public for review. That is on our planning website. If you go to planning/UDC, you can find those draft documents and places to make comment if you would like to do so. We have 2 more modules coming up in the future, and then we will have a final draft for council review in May, and we hope to have that project wrapped up and adopted by July of this year.